And for both of the men, on a pro was Jesse Miss Kelly's statement. The jury foreman had told them about it. It had not been, except for that blip that the judge allowed, it had not been mentioned in court. It was not part of the trial, and the attorneys for the defense never had a chance to attack it. Additionally, one of the jurors had kept handwritten notes throughout the trial, and she turned those over when contacted by the teams working for the defense. And all of this has been within, say, the past 5 or 6 years. She turned over her notes, which also mentioned Jesse Miss Kelly's statement. So it was the Little Rock lawyer's affidavit, the flip chart, and this evidence all pointing to juror misconduct. So it was a serious issue, and it certainly complicated matters for the state. Professor.
Almost everything I know about the case I learned from your excellent book, and I really do want to commend Devil's Knot to everyone. It's not only an excellently written book about a fascinating case, but it's documented and researched in a way that any law student can appreciate.
Thank you very much.
You spent a fairly large portion of the book pointing the finger, as many have, at the Byers boy's stepfather. It seems like people have backed away from that belief now. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts were that I shouldn't have done that. I felt that well, let me say, what stood out, I can understand why I did it, but that doesn't make it right.
Well,
So,
I didn't mean to put you on.
No. I'm taking blame. One of the big problem here was jumping to conclusions. That was the big problem for the police. That was the big problem for the prosecutors. Why did those prosecutors file charges against these three when they had nothing but Jesse Miss Kelly's very self-contradictory confession? And they never took, just 2 bits of it at that. They never took him out to the scene and videotaped him. It was remarkable to me that they would do that. But I'm also saying that the police work was atrocious. And unlike the O.J. Simpson case, where that became a big factor in his trial, Judge Burnett never allowed anyone to question the police work in this case. He continuously said the police are not on trial here, and rejected anything that went in that direction. So losing the Bojangle evidence and so forth was not allowed. The police barely questioned John Mark Byers, the stepfather of the boy that many of us, well, the crime lab had told us, had been castrated. They barely questioned him. I found out that Byers had used a stun gun on his former wife and had been charged and convicted of terroristic threatening, and that had been expunged and the record of it sealed. I found out that Byers had been arrested here in Memphis with cocaine and guns in his trunk and turned over to U.S. attorneys. He was jailed at the Shelby County Jail and then released to U.S. Marshals. I interviewed a U.S. attorney here in Memphis, and I said, "Can you tell me more? What happened to him? He's released with, he's arrested with guns and drugs in his trunk. He goes into jail. He's taken out of jail in the middle of the night, turned over to federal custody, and the next thing we know, he's a free guy. What happened there?" They told me, "We can't talk. We can't tell you a thing." Then I found out that during the making of the HBO film, a knife, Byers gave a knife to a member of the film crew. And when the film crew this was during Thanksgiving, right between the arrests in June of '93 and the trials that started in February of '94. Around Thanksgiving, about the same time that they searched the lake and came up with that other knife, Byers had given a knife, a little folding knife, to the member of the film crew. He just accepted it reluctantly, but and takes it off to New York, sitting around in a hotel room in New York, opens it up and sees a piece of red fiber that appears to have, and what appears to be blood in the fold. He packed it up and sent it back to the West Memphis police saying, I think you should have this, not me. The defense were very, of course, Ms. Kelly's defense was very interested in that and wanted to have it examined by state police. At that time, all that the forensic analysis could say was that it was human blood and that it was genetically similar to Christopher Byers, the victim who was believed to be castrated, and John Mark Byers, the stepfather. So then the police, the defense wanted to have John Mark Byers questioned by the state police. The judge would not allow that. He said he will be questioned by West Memphis police. And I quote extensively in my book the questioning by state police because it's remarkable. Byers starts out saying, they say, well, we got this knife here, we got to ask you about it. And he starts off by saying, oh, yeah, I gave that to those film guys. Looks like we found some blood in it. Byers said, I never used it. And then he said, well, it looks like they found some blood in it. And then Byers said, oh, yeah, I remember now. I used it to clean a deer once. And then they said, well, Mark, problem is it's human hair. Our problem is it's human hair. And I mean, human blood. And Byers said, well, I don't know. You got me now. So that's what I knew, but at the point where I wrote Devil's Knot. Police had barely questioned him. Even when this had come up, that was the kind of questioning he got. He was put on the stand. He was asked about the knife. He said he didn't have any idea how there would be human blood in there, and that's about where it all ended. I never found any record of the police having investigated, having questioned the parents of the other two boys, Michael Moore and Stevie Branch. What all police know is that when children are murdered, the first place you look is the families. Children are not hanging out at bars, they're not driving cars, they're not wandering the streets as a rule, especially 8-year-olds. It's unfortunate and it's hard on police, but that's the way it is and that's what has to be done. It barely happened. There was minuscule questioning of Byers because his child seemed to have been the target of, if indeed he was castrated at all, at that time he seemed to have been the target of the attack, the prime target. But the other two parents, or sets of parents, no record at all. In the past couple of years now, this, with massive amounts of money coming in for the defense, has allowed new DNA analysis of the evidence, and that did reveal that this hair belonging to a different stepfather, the stepfather of Stevie Branch, was found in the knots. Now that does not mean that he was the murderer. He maintains that there were many ways it could have been transferred to the crime scene on his own stepson's clothing and all kinds of ways, and that's a fact. However, that, against the fact that nothing relating to any of the men in prison was pretty persuasive, even to people in Arkansas, who had up until then had been pretty convinced. Then, two women who lived just down the street from the Branches, it was reported in the newspaper, the Jonesboro paper, that this hair had been found, and Branch was interviewed, and he said he had not even seen the boys on the day they disappeared. When that report came out, two neighbors of his from about 2 houses down came forward and signed affidavits saying that, to the contrary, they had seen Branch with all 3 children just within the hour before they were last seen alive. So that too became pretty important. I wrote Devil's Knot without that information, without any police records from the of any questioning by police, but knowing about the knife that HBO had relating to Byers, believing, not having heard the testimony of the forensic specialist, contradicting our state crime lab, that this was not a castration, that it was probably animal predation, and so I erred, and I would guess I would say again that the big warning here for me as a writer should be the warning for all of us, which is we've got to be really careful. We've got to be really, really careful. I don't think I ever came out and flat said that I thought Byers was the killer, but I thought there was a lot of evidence that pointed to him as a prime suspect.
Well, a lot of people thought that. That's why my real question was then, is the prevailing view then kind of that it wasn't, people accepted it wasn't Byers then? Is that kind of...
Well, Byers, if any of you saw the HBO films, was a raving maniac about, I'm going to see those boys in hell, and he was all over the place talking about how convinced he was of their guilt, and he's done a 180 and now believes that his former neighbor, the father of Todd, pardon me, I can't think now. Anyway, the stepfather of Stevie Branch was the killer, and so now Byers is proclaiming that, and his total belief that these guys were innocent all along. So is the mother of Stevie Branch. She believes that these guys were innocent as well. Did I get to your question then?
I just wondered about Byers. He's a real piece of work, as anybody who's seen any of his footage knows. And there was another fact that he had actually beat the boy, his dead son, with a belt that same afternoon before he was murdered.
Just hours before he was last seen alive. Yes, there were. And we just don't know. That's the point right now. We don't know. The only people who seem to be satisfied with the result of this case are the state's attorneys. The only people who are absolutely clear and certain that those 3 guys, killed those 3 children were the guys that they just let out of prison. So, go figure.
I hate to cut you off here. I'm sure you can do some questions afterward, but it is 1 o'clock when we have some classes. But we'd like to extend our sincere appreciation for you coming today, this afternoon. On behalf of the school, we got you a plaque or the photo of the grand opening.
Oh, I've always admired this building, and I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.